Good morning and welcome to the show. I'm here with Vonda, the Coupon Queen, to get some money-saving tips today, as we do every week. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Don.
You know, I called you. I think I was really excited over a savings that I had just discovered. You know, we had to take the whole family to New York for a wedding. So here I am booking flights and stuff and say, well, let's try this airport, let's try that airport. I discovered if you travel from hub to hub, like say Orlando to Newark, you'd save a little money. But if you travel from a hub to a smaller airport that they service, like Atlantic City, which is near New York, you save a ton of money, literally half price. So it's worth the drive. We're going to drive to Orlando. We're going to spend the night. The next day, we're going to fly to Atlantic City, because that's kind of the gambler run, I suppose. So I don't know what kind of characters will be on that flight, but you know, for the whole family, it's literally half price. There's a lot of little things you can do like that.
Exactly, and all people have to do is ask.
Yeah.
AARP. If you're 50 years and older, you know, you're entitled to have an AARP card, and you get discounts everywhere, even free donuts at Dunkin' Donuts. I don't know if the average person knows that even McDonald's here locally, you can get a cup of coffee for 25 cents just for being a senior. And we're both prior military. Ask for military discounts everywhere, even in clothing stores. I mean, almost everything that we use, there's a way.
You do have to show your military
ID. To show your
or
military ID.
your retiree ID card. But oh yeah, when I go to like Home Depot or Lowe's, that's 10%. I mean, that adds up to big money if you're making a big purchase.
That's true. And even for tires or oil changes, whether you go to the dealership or to someplace like Firestone, I never leave home without my iPad. I go to firestone.com or even toyota.com. Let's see, what do they have? What kind of discounts for oil changes, tires, maintenance? There are discounts for almost everything that we utilize on a regular basis.
That's just amazing. So it's not always coupons per se, and it's not always sales. You know, discounts can be year-round.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For everything, and definitely school's going to be out soon. I mean, I was ecstatic when you told me about the money that you saved. I mean, half,
literally
by
half
flying
price.
out of Orlando.
And when you're talking about, you know, 4 people traveling, you know, you're running into a lot of money and a lot of dough. So, you know, a little extra effort can save you a lot of money.
That's true.
Yeah, and I never thought of, you know, and it's a funny thing, you know, it's not that I'm dying to go to Atlantic City or anything, but my sister happens to live, she spends half the year at the Jersey Shore, so it's like, why don't you come out to the house? And we're like, okay, we'll just go there and we'll drive to New York. So a little bit of driving, you know, and I got to tell you, even with the hotel room and everything, it's still cheaper.
See, and you're still keeping extra money in your pocket.
Well, you know what we're doing with that money savings? When we come back to Orlando, we're going to stay there and have a little vacation afterwards. So
see, how awesome is that?
So,
something. See, now, had you gone the original route and spent all of the money, you wouldn't be seeing your sister, and you wouldn't get to have another vacation on top of the wedding. You wouldn't be able to do that.
So, you know, it kind of snowballed into. We weren't planning it that way, but it was like, hey, we got some extra money. We're going to be in Orlando. Why not?
See, it pays to save. My play on words.
It pays to save.
See?
So, you know, and you get those and many other money-saving tips, you know, from your Facebook page.
Yes, definitely.
Which is Vonda the Coupon Queen.
Yep, the Coupon Queen, QPONQWEEN.
The Coupon Queens, and it's not just over the summertime. It's not just, you know, it's all year round.
It's all year round.
That you can get discounts, coupons, savings, points.
Oh yes, points too. You just don't be scared. Do not. I always tell people, don't be scared to ask. That's extra money that you get to keep in your pocket.
And I signed up for a lot of these things like CVS. They're always sending me an email with a coupon.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Yeah, and every time I make a purchase at, like, say, Office Depot, I get some points.
So you're getting good at this.
I am getting some good on, and you don't have to carry a big card around.
No.
Little thing that hangs off your keychain, they zap it, and you're off to the races. So you save a little money that way as well.
That's true.
I mean, there are money-saving opportunities out there. You just got to find out where they are.
Yep. And JCPenney's is my favorite store to shop at. Every time I go, I always ask the cashier, do you have a coupon?
Yep. Got to ask them.
Yep.
Because you don't have to walk up to them with a coupon, just ask them. And we did that in Sears one time. Karen did that. And she goes, yes, ma'am, we do have coupons. And right there at the register. She pulled out the coupons, gave them to us, gave us credit for it. We didn't have to clip them.
See? You can't beat that.
You can't beat it. Founder of the Coupon Queen, thank you so much for those money-saving tips. And we'll be right back after your Waking Up with Don weather. Welcome back to the show. I'm here with Laura Nelson from A-List Accounting. I almost called you Nora Lelson. I don't know where that came from, but welcome back to the show. You know, tax season is just about over, but a lot of people put in for extensions and things like that. So, you know, tax season can grind on for a few more months.
That's correct.
For a lot of us.
Yes.
Now, I have a friend who is a victim of tax fraud. Oh. Yes, and that is a very scary thing. I had heard from law enforcement that, you know, criminality, you know, in this country, there's always a new wave of criminality. Yeah. You know, first it was drugs, then it was credit card fraud, and now somehow it's tax fraud.
Right.
And,
yes.
and people are stealing other people's Social Security numbers.
Right. Just to file their tax return. I mean, ideally, they're not stealing their Social Security number to apply for a credit card or anything. They're just doing it just to file for a tax return, so they get money back, but they have no social, so they're using yours.
When you look at things like, say, the earned income credit, you know, there's a real incentive
Exactly.
to do that, particularly if you're in this country illegally and all that, you know, that, you know, maybe you're working, but you're not here legally, so you need a Social Security number to get a little return back, so just use someone else's. And that's why it's so important to safeguard your information like that. Yeah,
and checking your credit report at least annually. It's free, and then even if you pay for a service at times, it may be worth it.
Yeah, I guess you could go to like places like Credit Karma,
right?
And you get a free, you know. I don't think it's current. I don't think it's real time, but you know, you'll at least get, you know, up until the last few months. Yeah,
and then LifeLock, I think, is the one you pay monthly.
And so they monitor that for you.
Yep.
Now, if you're a victim of identity theft around tax time, what should you do?
Oh, let's see. There's a lot.
There's a lot to it. I know there's a whole lot to it.
Right.
But, and I know the IRS has a web page specifically set up for all of that, and they have the 1, 2, 3 steps. But let's talk about those steps after the commercial break. And we'll be right back with Laura Nelson from A-List Accounting. Welcome back to the show. I'm here with Laura Nelson from A-List Accounting, and we're talking about identity theft around tax time and what you should do if you become a victim of identity theft. Laura, as we discussed in the earlier segment, you know, there is a brisk secondary market in Social Security numbers around tax time, and people are filing, usually people without Social Security accounts, or stealing other people's Social Security numbers to get a return.
Exactly.
So if you become a victim, the IRS has some great resources, don't they?
Yes, they do. And yeah, they give you a long list of places to go and things to do in order to help resolve that issue. But first thing is go file a police report, and then also fill out a Federal Trade Commission's form. And then you don't have to contact all 3 bureaus, credit bureaus.
You should put a fraud alert on your credit as well.
You just do one of them, and it'll do all 3.
So basically, it's a couple of, I would like to say easy steps, but you'll be running around to do this. I mean, if you're a victim, I mean, the onus really falls on you to make things right. You know, the government's not going to do it for you, and certainly the perpetrator, the person who stole your information, isn't going to do it for you either. So the very first thing is to file a police report. Now, you can go to the Bay County Sheriff's Office or give them a call and say, hey, I think someone's stolen my Social Security number. You know, I mean, you would find out about this kind of fraud if you go to file your return and it bounces back.
Exactly. And it gives you an error code saying that it's already been filed and now you need to look into it and file a paper copy. Yeah.
So police report, Federal Trade Commission complaint, a fraud affidavit with the IRS. You have to alert the credit bureaus and put a fraud alert on that. And you might even want to talk to your bank and say, hey, you know, I suspect my Social Security number's been compromised. And just keep an eye on things. And then when you file your return, you got to do it by paper.
And attach that stuff with it.
And attach all that stuff with it. And then from there on out, for the rest of your life, you'll have to have a PIN number
to go
file
along
your-
with your social, yes, or they won't accept it.
Because they won't accept it because you've
Yep.
already been compensated. It's a scary world we live in, and I guess word to the wise, Laura, is to, safeguard your personal information as much as you can.
Yes.
Particularly
Yes.
that Social Security number.
And that's the reason why with businesses that are sole proprietors, I suggest they go and get an FEIN number so that when they're giving out their W-9, they give out an FEIN number and not their social.
That's right. That EIN number gets out there.
Exactly.
Wise advice. Thank you, Laura Nelson from A-List Accounting, for that unsettling yet useful information. And we'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. I'm here with Heather Noyes from Raymond James Financial, and we're yucking it up about alternative investments.
Right.
Right. Alternative investments. Okay. What does that mean?
Well, let's start with volatility, because that just tends to be the thing that scares people most from investing, and they want, security and safety. And I can understand that. So I'm going to share with you a way that maybe you can reduce that volatility. I'm going to start by asking you a question. Let's say you lost 20% in your portfolio in a year. How much do you have to make the next year in order to break even?
Oh, to make up that 20%, I guess 40% more, right?
Well, somewhere along that line. It's about 25%.
Because you want to make up for 20, and then you want to maintain your usual 20% if you can, right?
Right. Oh, yeah, that guaranteed 20%.
Yeah, that nobody ever gets.
Right. So, the volatility is a real thing, and then again, you've got to make more than what you lost in order to break even, and get back to where you were. So one way to do that is through diversification. And we've talked about having bonds and stocks and cash and providing, some kind of, you have different investment vehicles to give you that diversification. Well, over the years, really what's kind of happened is those asset classes have become pretty correlated. In other words, like we saw in 2008 and 7, bonds went down, stocks went down. Bonds go up, stocks have gone up. Whereas in the past, they used to be really kind of inverse or negatively correlated to each other. So if stocks went up, bonds didn't do well. If bonds went up, stocks weren't doing well. But now they're more correlated to where sometimes they both will go up or they'll both go down at the same time.
Wow. So what do you do?
Exactly. So bringing in something like an alternative investment. And alternative investments in the past have really only been available to institutions and very high net worth investors. In fact, most institutions now have about a 50% allocation to alternative investments for that reason.
What would be an example of an alternative investment?
You've probably heard the term hedge funds, which hedge funds are pretty broad. They have long short funds. There's managed futures is another area. There's what we call private equity placement, real estate, commodities. All of these things are what we would consider alternative investments. And again, the institutions and the endowments, they're putting them in their portfolios to, again, make it even kind of playing field, because maybe they've got a pension that they're going to be paying out forever and ever over these people's life expectancy. So they've got to keep some kind of, level playing field.
So say an alternative investment doesn't necessarily do the opposite of what everything else is doing. It just keeps it at a steady state.
It's not opposite, but they're not correlated at all, generally speaking. So there's no correlation. So stocks could go up, they could go up, stocks could go up, they could go down, but they're negatively correlated, which actually putting that into a portfolio does create a more level playing field. And I'll show you an example too. This slide right here shows a traditional 60-40 portfolio. The green is traditional equities, and the blue is bonds. So an average return of 5% over time, with a standard deviation of 10. Standard deviation is the amount of volatility. So a lower standard deviation means it doesn't fluctuate as much. So you can see over time, if we add alternatives in, let's say 20% alternatives, which is the green, or the light green rather, that you actually increase that return to almost 6%, and you've reduced the standard deviation or the volatility, and going all the way out here on the spectrum where you have 40% in alternatives, 40% in bonds, and the rest in traditional equities, you can increase that return and really decrease the amount of volatility that you get in the portfolio.
So having those alternatives is really it sounds like a calming kind of force on your portfolio.
Really,
you know?
Absolutely. And we don't traditionally recommend though that 40% allocation also, because there are some other factors involved in the alternative investments. They're not really liquid. There's some other expenses involved. So maybe not a 40% allocation like I showed you there, but some allocation to alternatives is going to bring some, calmness, if you will.
Should everybody have that in their portfolio?
I think so, yes.
Mm-hmm. And if you're not doing it, naturally, we need to call Heather
Absolutely.
Noyes at Raymond James Financial
Absolutely.
to figure out how to get some of that and how to calm things down to mitigate the volatility in the market that always seems to happen.
Right.
Thank you so much, Heather Noyes, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. I'm here with Dan Hines from Dan Hines Coaching. Dan, always a pleasure seeing you, my friend.
Good morning, Don. Thank you, yes.
And like all my guests, I always learn a little something from you. I remember in a past episode when you were on, you talked about that sweet spot in earnings that kind of gives you that can you buy happiness question answered at about 75K.
Right.
Yeah.
And it turns out that just recently here in the news is that there's a CEO of a company called Gravity Payments, and they're out in Seattle, Washington.
Gravity Payments, what type of business is that?
So they're kind of like Square or MasterCard, where they process payments for you.
Okay, gotcha.
And really no one's known about them outside the state of Washington until now. And what he did was he decided that as CEO, he's going to take his paycheck, his salary, from $1 million, and he's going to go down to $70,000.
Wow!
And his minimum salary for all of his employees now is going to be $70,000 a year. Because he read that same study that said, as you make money, you do get happier and happier, because money can help buy, it gets you a car that works, and it gets you a roof over your head, and it feeds you. But at about $70,000 or $75,000 a year, it starts to flatten out. As you can start doubling your income. You can make $150,000 a year, $300,000 a year, but your happiness won't double along with it, or it gets harder. And so he read that and said, a lot like you had mentioned with Henry Ford, is that if you pay your people more, they're going to be a little bit happier and be able to spend money.
Back in the day, Henry Ford paid his workers an unprecedented $5 a day. It was unheard of in those days. But his theory was, I want my employees to be able to buy the cars that they make.
Yes, exactly. And so that's what this CEO has done as well, is to say, well, I'm going to pay everybody $70,000, and he's taking a paycheck to do it. Now, the good news with his company is that it's a private company, so there's no shareholders that are getting mad, and there's no.
And that's not the long arm of government saying you have to pay them,
exactly.
this amount of a wage.
He has just decided as a company this is what we're going to do, and I'm excited to see what happens. Just pure intellectual curiosity.
Now, he's going to take compensation on the other end of this whole thing, I'm sure, because he's the owner.
Yes.
And if he's got happy, prosperous, productive employees, it's going to increase the value of his company in the long run anyway.
Absolutely. And so the last point, or another point that I want to make, is that just because you're making more money, it's how you spend it. It's how you're going to spend that money that really helps you become a happier person. Because I've been reading this book called Happy Money, and it's actually the science and the studies that they've done on how people spend money and how it relates to happiness. And a lot of times, I think we may have talked about it before, but you can buy a better car, but is it going to get you to work faster? Is it, is it going to get you through traffic any faster? If it has a seat warmer, it's great. But how much more happiness are you going to get out of that? Plus, once you buy that new car, eventually the newness wears off. And so rather than things, it's experiences. Is that if you can take that money and take your kids to Disney World, that can create a lot of memories, and memories can make you happy as well.
So maybe that minivan will make you happier than that sports car.
Possibly, because it might help. You have a lot of fun adventures in the minivan.
I know we did in our minivan. As a matter of fact, Karen and I were talking about that this morning before the show.
Okay.
It's like, hey, I just saw your old minivan on the street, which we had sold 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And someone's still driving one just like it, a Nissan Quest, and that's not a plug for Nissan. It's just the van we happened to buy. But you know how many trips to Disneyland we did in that thing, or Disney World and Universal and all that?
The things that go wrong, they make great stories. So when you're making more money, it's fantastic. But then how you're spending it has a giant deal and is a big deal with how happy you can be.
So it's the experiences that really count. It's the things you do with your money, the relationships that you fortify, build, and start with that, and that allows you a lifestyle to go out and do things.
Absolutely.
Not just collect things.
Right, and that's what I teach my families to do, is to say, okay, well, now that we're budgeting and we're you're starting to make more money and you have more freedom to do these things, you know, what can we do to help you out?
Yeah.
And also happiness can come from three things, is that if you're spending your money on something that is pleasurable, something that is meaningful, but also something that is engaging. You're doing something, you're thinking at the same time, is something that really helps out. Is if you can get all three of those, and they're an experience that you're willing to go do, that's one of the best things you can do to help.
So maybe buying that canoe isn't such a bad idea.
Probably
or
not,
buying that
yeah.
RV or boat. A boat is a horrible idea, but I mean,
right. And if you keep
unless
using
it's from
it,
Marine Max, of course.
well, and if you keep using it and keep using it and keep using
That's
it,
right.
it makes some great.
Then it's money
memories.
well spent.
Absolutely.
Dan Hines, I always learn something when you come on the show, and thank you so much
Very
for
good.
sharing your wisdom with us
Thank you,
and
Don.
all the reading that you do on money. And can it make you happy? To a point.
Absolutely.
And I guess that's the answer.
This is true.
And that's going to have to be the last word.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.